the state of the franchise for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before I dive into it, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I upload NFL videos and college football videos daily. So, the state of the franchise for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers finished the 2019 NFL season with an 8-8 record. Now, for a lot of people who don't follow the story of the Pittsburgh Steelers this past season, and you just go by record, you would say the Pittsburgh Steelers had an average season. But when you take into a deeper dive of what happened to this Pittsburgh Steelers team, you would be really, really happy, and you would be really, really impressed that Pittsburgh was able to go 8-8. Now, one takeaway from this season that you can take away if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan is that Mike Tomlin is most definitely an elite coach. Now, it was a lot of criticism about Mike Tomlin coming into this season, the 2019 NFL season. A lot of Steelers fans wanted to move away from Mike Tomlin, myself included, right? Pittsburgh started out, 0-3, 1-4. Ben Roethlisberger got injured, second game of the season. So after the second game of the season, Ben Roethlisberger was done. The Pittsburgh Steelers could have said, you know what? We're done. We're just going to go ahead. We're going to tank. We're going to try to get a top 5 draft pick. As a Steelers fan, a lot of people were probably thinking the season was over. Once Big Ben went down with the injury, it was no way Pittsburgh had a chance of winning another football game, right? But Pittsburgh starts Mason Rudolph. They pull out a couple of wins. Then Mason Rudolph suffers an injury. He gets knocked out by Earl Thompson in that Baltimore game. Then Duck Hodges comes in. Duck Hodges wins you a couple of games. You beat teams like the Rams, the Colts in some of these games, who were at the time were very solid teams who were competing for the playoffs at this point in the season. And nobody thought Pittsburgh had a chance to beat some of these teams, right? So, you get Duck Hodges, he comes in, he wins you a couple of games. And on top of that, you got Duck Hodges in, your fourth-string quarterback coming into the season. Duck Hodges was on the practice squad. He was behind Joshua Dobbs on the depth chart. So, once they traded for Minka Fitzpatrick, they were like, you know what? We trust Mason Rudolph, that Mason Rudolph is the guy going forward. Now, although at the end of the season, we know that Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, neither one are the quarterbacks of the future for Pittsburgh, they were really solid backups at the time, right? They all were able to get Pittsburgh in the position that they were able to compete for the playoffs. Now, given the defense was really, really good, the Pittsburgh Steelers traded for Minka Fitzpatrick, got rid of the first-round pick for Minka Fitzpatrick, and he played like an all-pro. Minka Fitzpatrick is going to be an all-pro. And he's also going to be a Pro Bowler, right? So, you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you're like, okay, so we were able to go 8-8 without Juju Smith-Schuster for a very big stretch of the season, without James Conner, who missed several games out of the injury. Then you had a couple of games that you had to go without your starting center and Pouncey. So, you also lose Stephon Tuitt, who Stephon Tuitt, I believe, was on pace to having one of the best seasons of his career. So, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you're a Steelers fan, you have a lot of optimism about the Pittsburgh Steelers going into the 2020 NFL season. Because Ben Roethlisberger is coming back. Then, you're looking at this wide receiver group that was very young, that really came together and made some big plays when it mattered. Deontay Johnson, in my opinion, should be in consideration for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Because it was a lot of good, talented rookie wide receivers. You got A.J. Brown, you got DK Metcalf. But Deontay Johnson also belongs in that conversation because he made a lot of big plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers down the stretch. He had that return against the Arizona Cardinals. He made a lot of big plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense. At one point, he was the Pittsburgh Steelers' best player on offense. You probably could say that he was the MVP of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Because he made a lot of big plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense when it mattered. You also got James Washington, who in 2020 is going to be in year 3 of his career. He emerged and actually had some very good games for the Pittsburgh Steelers and stepped up and made some big plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you're looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, and you're looking at this wide receiving core in general. When Ben Roethlisberger comes back with another added year of development, this wide receiving core could potentially be one of the best in the NFL going into next season, depending on how much these wide receivers develop. Now, you got Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster struggled this season. But I still think Juju is capable of being the number one wide receiver. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, DeAndre Hopkins was able to have a lot of production without having a true quarterback and things like that. And all of that is true. Not every wide receiver is the same. Every wide receiver somewhat needs some kind of a quarterback. And I mean, at least the quarterbacks that Houston had were able to somewhat push the football down the field. Mason Rudolph and Doug Collins just weren't really that great when it came to throwing the deep ball this season. Pittsburgh, basically when those two were in that quarterback, they said, you know, we're just going to dink and dump our way down the field and run the football. We're not really going to try to take a lot of risks downfield and risk turning the football over, which was pretty smart considering the fact that you can't really ask your offense to do a lot. Considering the fact that it was struggling, you need all the possessions you can get, so you don't really want to take a chance of trying to turn the football over. So, on the defense side of the football, right? It's going to be a lot of contracts that the Pittsburgh Steelers have to try to figure out. I think if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you most definitely have to try to keep Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree had a career season. He most definitely should have made it to the Pro Bowl. And Pittsburgh needs to be able to keep him around for this season. Because coming into the 2019 season, Bud Dupree was nobody but just an outsider. We were all looking at Bud Dupree as a guy who was a really disappointed first-round pick, hasn't really had a lot of production. Contract year brought the best out of Bud Dupree. So if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to find a way to keep him around. You also got to figure out a way to keep Mike Hilton around, because Mike Hilton is a really good slot corner. One of the best slot corners that we have in the NFL today. He's very good in coverage, and also he's a very good tackler as well. Now, you got to find a way to bring those guys back. Then, you got a problem that you have to address at safety. You got Terrell Edmunds. Listen, Pittsburgh is a franchise that doesn't like to give up on their first-round picks really easily. They like to give them at least 3 years because we saw how long Artie Burns remained in the lineup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But at this point, you got to look at Terrell Edmunds. And you got to look at potentially bringing in some competition for Terrell Edmunds because he hasn't really been that impressive. And I'm looking at a guy like a Marcus Allen who is behind Terrell Edmunds. I'm trying to figure out why Marcus Allen hasn't been given more opportunities given how poorly Terrell Edmunds has played in some of these games in the 2019 season. So if you're Pittsburgh, I'm looking at potentially bringing in some competition at safety for Terrell Edmunds. Because Terrell Edmunds, although Pittsburgh is a franchise that doesn't really love to give up on their first-round picks, they normally get their first-round picks a couple of seasons before they're ready to get rid of them. And most of the time, it ends up paying off. You look at Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree wasn't really that good coming into the season. A lot of people were ready to cut ties with him. They were ready to cut him. They gave him this season. The last season, he had to prove himself, and he had a monster season. So maybe Terrell Edmunds comes around. Maybe year 3 he comes around next season. He has an all-pro season or Pro Bowl caliber season. But you can't argue with the fact that Terrell Edmunds' play has to improve. And if you're Pittsburgh, if you were smart, you bring in some competition to try to push Terrell Edmunds. So overall, the state of the franchise for the Pittsburgh Steelers is pretty bright. Now, in the upcoming draft, you got to find you a quarterback. You got to bring in another quarterback. Now, this quarterback class for 2020 is loaded with talent at the quarterback position. You can get you a guy like a Jacob Eason maybe in the second round. Maybe you can get you a Jordan Love out of Utah in the third round. Maybe you can get you a guy like a Aaron Gordon. You got a lot of good quarterbacks who will fit well in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think the most important needs that you need to get going into the draft is that if I'm Pittsburgh, I draft another quarterback in the second round. Maybe I draft another halfback in the third round, bring in another halfback for that halfback room because James Conner, when he's healthy, he's a stud. But when he's not, but the thing is, it's not about what he can do when he is healthy because you are never able really to see how good James Conner is because he's never really healthy. He's basically a piece of glass playing the halfback position. And at the halfback position, you can't overly rely on the halfback that gets injured every time he touches the football. So if you're Pittsburgh, you need to bring in some more competition. Now, Pittsburgh has had a lot of production at the halfback position this year. You had Benny Snell, who looked really good at a stretch. You had Jalen Samuels, who looked pretty solid. And behind this offensive line, you're not asking a lot to ask a halfback behind this offensive line the Pittsburgh Steelers have to go back there and have some production, because it's one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. So if you're Pittsburgh, I would try to get a quarterback in the second round. Third round, I'll try to bring in another halfback maybe. Then I'll try to focus on bringing in some more defensive backs. So this is the state of the franchise for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.